we are positive people, and I think that this whole topic can be misinterpreted as like, oh, you just can't be positive at all. You have to just recognize all of the hard stuff and the negative feelings. And no, it's both. It's making space for all of the emotions and all of the experiences and not minimizing any one of them. Hi, I'm Peavy.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and welcome to Blank is a Mother podcast. We've been best friends since college, and we're using a comparative lens to share how we're coming into our power after 40.
We aren't supposed to compare, right? Well, we all know that's not realistic.
We started this podcast when our boys were toddlers. They are growing fast, and we've been growing too.
The first few years of motherhood shook our lives and friendship like no other experience has. And by comparing and contrasting our evolution up to that point in our lives and beyond, we have discovered the strongest threads of sisterhood yet.
Listen, we don't have all the answers. We sure have made some missteps.
Follow along as we do our best to nurture our friendship and build an inclusive community while making 1,000 tiny mama decisions in an unfair world. Hi, I'm Peavy.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and welcome to Blank is a Mother podcast.
We are so busy these days. It's been actually kind of challenging to find time for us to record. And it's one of those things where we have to schedule out to the minute, weeks and weeks in advance. But we're here.
We're here. We're excited to be back in this space so we can talk about some other cool topics that we think will resonate with you all.
Yeah, today and this is actually a topic we've been wanting to talk about for a while. We want to talk about toxic positivity, and that toxic positivity is a mother, and I think is unique to mothers, how we experience toxic positivity. Although, of course, anyone and everyone experiences toxic positivity, and we'll explain more about what that is, because we're certainly not anti-positivity by any means. We love positive everything, positive vibes, positive thinking, manifestation. We're in it to win it. But it's not the end all be all, and it's not the only way to live life in a positive bubble, not experiencing all the other emotions and recognizing that sometimes life is really hard and shit is just shitty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And creating space to just be in your feelings and just recognize and appreciate how awful things can be, and that, you can still enjoy life and have really wonderful relationships and experiences and still have hard stuff going on.
Amen.
And ignoring it doesn't do any good. Speaking of good, we had actually been talking about toxic positivity in our own worlds, and we didn't even really know that it was like a defined thing until, I'm an avid podcast listener. So I was listening to one of the podcasts I like called Mom Well. It's hosted by a psychologist that works with postpartum moms and all moms. And she had Dr. Whitney Goodman on to talk about her book, Toxic Positivity, Keeping It Real in a World Obsessed with Being Happy. And I was like, oh, this is what Jamie and I have been talking about. This is a real thing. There's a whole book on it. I dove into this topic in more detail and then started feeding you, of course, all the stuff that I was coming across.
Well, I think the thing is that we named it. We found out that it had a name because we both experienced it. And it's one of those things we'll talk about, we'll define it. But it's one of those things that when it's happening to you, you're like, this doesn't feel good. Like, I know someone's trying to make me feel good, but it ain't working. So I think it'll be interesting to talk about how that is coming to play in our lives. And we'd love to hear from you all, after this podcast, if you have experienced toxic positivity, or if your light bulb goes off and you think, uh-oh, I think I have been a person that has delivered some toxic positivity without even realizing that that's what I was doing, because I'm guilty of doing that as well. So
yeah, we all are. It's just being aware. And to add to what you just said, it's not only that it doesn't feel good, a lot of times it actually is making it worse. The person who's offering the positivity has good intentions and wants to be supportive and uplifting. And really what the person that needs support really just needs space to vent and to experience whatever is happening and not feel like they have to minimize it to still be liked or still be, fun to be around.
Mm-hmm.
The person that needs support actually starts feeling shame and embarrassment, and maybe they start withdrawing. And so, yeah, it can be really detrimental at times.
Impact over intention.
In preparation for talking about this in more depth for the podcast, you and I got the audiobook, and I wanted to give a plug. This is a PSA,
Mm-hmm.
and most of you probably don't need this, but I did. I do. Public libraries are so amazing. And I feel really silly that I didn't know how amazing they were before I had a child. So I have been definitely making use of all of the caretaker and baby events since ever was a baby at the children's library. And then, now we're into like checking out books and all this stuff for him as a kid. And recently our children's library was closed for construction. So we had to actually use the main library above. And I was like, oh, there's so much offered by the public library. There's basically nothing that the public library doesn't offer. You can check out passes to any local museum, the zoo, like everything for free, just with your free membership card. You can check out computers and iPads and other learning educational games. The sky's the limit. All these audiobooks. I don't know why anyone, obviously we're not going to get a sponsorship from Audible. I don't know why anyone would pay for those subscriptions because you can get them for free.
I'm one of those people.
Stop.
I know, girl, but listen, people are creatures of habit. So, like, for me, it's easier for me in my mind to I have an Audible subscription just to click on it. And it's like, this makes no sense because John, who is way ahead of everything all the time, I feel like that's all he listens to are audiobooks. And he has the app through the library and will just go and do them. And you know who else spends a lot of time in the children's library? Maxine Beale. She takes LJ there, and she used to take Maya there when she was little. So yeah, shout out to the public library and your app for your free audiobook.
They have multiple apps. So if your book isn't on the one app, you just look at the other app. And yeah, you just link your membership like John has been doing for years. And it's movies too. It's movies, it's shows, it's anything. So anyway, I don't know why I'm so behind the times, but everybody get a library card. Make use of the resources. They have so many events for families and kids, but also for adults. When we were up in the main library, there were so many adults there that don't have access to probably the services that the circles that I roll in do. They were getting hooked up right and left. And I was like, yes, this is what a public service is all about. This is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we're late in different ways. You're late in that you're just realizing that they have all those resources. I'm late in that I knew they had the resources, but I was being too lazy to download and connect all the apps. So I'm going to need both of us to step our games up in our own ways.
So I took advantage of the free rental of this audiobook and I listened to the whole thing and it was awesome.
Well, I didn't take advantage of the free and I downloaded the damn thing on Audible, but yeah, but I got it.
That is the conclusion of our public library PSA. Thank you, librarians and public libraries.
Amen.
Yes, let's jump in. So we kind of thought that a framing in the beginning might be nice to talk about before we knew it had a name, how it was coming up for us just in life as humans, but also specifically as moms or wannabe moms.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I shared with PV, and I mean, I have to share it. She knows, like, she's been on this journey with me. But listening to this toxic positivity book and thinking about how toxic positivity has shown up in my life, one very profound way was when John and I were trying to get pregnant. And we're on our journey, we're tracking ovulation, you're doing all the stuff before we decided to go through IVF. And people mean well. And I always have to say this, they mean well. Impact over intention, though. We would hear things like, there's nothing wrong with you all. I mean, you don't need fertility treatments. Get drunk, have some good old school sex. Stop thinking about it. You're overthinking. You're putting too much pressure on yourself. Just relax. Just get some drinks and relax. You guys are good. You'll be fine. You'll have a baby. And again, people mean well. My mind is like, well, you don't think that I'm having drinks and trying to have sex and trying to relax? We are doing that. So thank you. But it was the minimizing of our journey, which ultimately resulted in us having to go through IVF because that's what we needed to do to have the baby. So when you are surrounded by people that are saying, oh, girl, you don't need that. You just need to go have some sex and drink some tequila and hang out and enjoy your man. When it turns out that we did need to go through IVF, it's like, oh, all right, well, good luck.
Yeah.
I like to start with that because it was one of the first times that I could actually understanding that people meant well and they wanted John and I to have a baby just as badly as we wanted to have a baby. But in that, telling us that it's easy to do and that we're just not doing it the right way doesn't necessarily help the situation. That was a toxic, positive thing that happened over and over and over again with well-intentioned people. What about you? Do you have one on the top of your brain?
The same one, basically.
Yeah.
Not with getting pregnant with Everett, because fortunately that happened easier than we thought it would even. But as everyone well knows, we've been trying to have a second baby for years, going on 4 years now. And we have certainly been deep in that camp that you and John were in, where everyone has, oh, just take some supplements. Are you taking a prenatal? You should take a prenatal. It's stress. You need to reduce your stress. Don't think about it. Track your ovulation. Yeah, I've been doing that for 4 years. Thank you very much. I'm so sick of tracking my fucking ovulation. All the tips and everything. So it's that makes you feel like I'm doing something wrong. So not only is it minimizing what you're going through, and then you start criticizing yourself and what you're doing. Oh, clearly we're doing something wrong. All these people are sharing stories about, oh, it happened. Oh, but my girlfriend, when she was 45, blah, 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 blah. And that's great for her. That's great for their family. That is not our situation. And then there's people who are afraid to say the wrong thing. And so they completely ignore it, that it's even happening. And then they just don't ever even acknowledge that you're going through this major thing in your life. It could actually be a way to connect with that person. And if you don't know what to say, you just say, this is really hard, I can tell. How can I support you? What do you need? Do you just need someone to listen? Do you want advice?
100%.
What is it that I can offer you? Because this is really hard for you and me. How can I connect with you? How can I support you? What do you need? I have been guilty of the same thing. This happens to me when someone experiences a really tragic loss. It's so hard to know what to say. And so you don't want to say the wrong thing or like repeat all the platitudes and cliches. You just retreat and you just kind of freeze and you don't say anything. And then you've missed this opportunity to support and connect. It's just really hard.
It is. I want to piggyback off of that. So I just came back from doing a workshop with the client and we were talking about cultural generalities. And I gave an example of silence and how in some Western cultures, people are uncomfortable with silence. And so we always feel like we have to say something or fill that silence with something. And there are other cultures where silence is seen as a sign of respect. Like, I don't need to say anything. You've said it all. I feel you. I'm on board and I don't have to say anything. And that silence is seen as respect and a good thing. But in some Western cultures, we have been conditioned to believe we have to say something. And I think that's where all of those, I'll pray for you. And God doesn't give us more than we can handle.
Everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens for a reason. You're so strong. And I'm generalizing as a culture have been conditioned to believe that those are the things that you need to say in those moments when people are sharing something that's painful for them. And so I do agree to an extent that not saying something could be seen as a missed opportunity to connect. So yes, I agree with that. And I can see silence as being okay. Because otherwise we feel like we need to fill that silence with something that is generic or cliche, and it is still minimizing. And that's when those toxic positive terms come into view because they're like, oh shit, I need to say something. Jamie told me about this thing that she's going through and I've never been through it. I can't empathize. I can sympathize, but I don't know what to say. So I'm just going to say something generic just so I say something. So I invite us to say, you know what, there's nothing wrong with sitting in silence sometimes too, until you can find the thing that is going to be encouraging. So that's it. I wanted to offer a different perspective on silence because it can be a missed opportunity to connect, and it could be an opportunity to connect because you're letting the person that is sharing their feelings share without you feeling the need to interject.
That's a really, really good point. It brought up a couple of global events where I think silence gets really uncomfortable for people, but I actually see it more under the lens of what you just shared about how silence can actually be really accepting. And that is the social unrest that really exploded when you were pregnant with LJ and having LJ. Like, I'll just name one, but there were so many, but George Floyd's murder.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were so many people that because they had been toxically positive their entire existences about those issues and just completely ignored them and they weren't a part of their thought process. Everything was so new and they really were in listening mode.
Some people.
Some people. But like the people that really did care, I'm just kind of focusing on them, that they cared. They didn't know what to say because it was so new to them. And I think they knew whatever they were going to say was going to be wrong in some way. And I actually would get personal messages because during that period, I was not silent. I was very vocal about what I believed. And I had some people reach out to me personally, just like DMs, just saying, I don't even know where to start or what to do. Can you give me some advice? And so I see that as being silent, but actually being really like intentional about when you ask and when you speak up and to whom, so that you don't
Mm-hmm.
hurt someone's feelings or say something that you wish you didn't say.
Yeah.
The other one is global wars. Like there's a huge one right now in Gaza and Israel. And I have not said a word about that because I've reached out individually to some people to show
Mm-hmm.
support and to say, this really sucks. I can't imagine what this feels like for you,
Mm-hmm.
but I know it must be terrible. But I am one of those people that you just described as being more silent just out of respect. Like I want to listen and absorb everything that everyone is sharing, but I don't really have a leg to stand on in terms of voicing my own thoughts and opinions on this because it all is terrible. Like every way you look at it, it is terrible.
Oh, yeah. And I want to clarify, in me saying like it's sometimes comfortable sitting in the silence, I don't want that to come across as like we were talking about, that if we're passionate about a topic, not to stand up and to speak out about something that's happening. Because I do think that's valuable. Like we have to say, well, we don't have to. We should say something when there are injustices happening. Yes. My lens was more so about a personal, like a one-on-one
Mm-hmm.
conversation with someone about something that they're going through and feeling like we need to fill the silence then, especially if you're on a phone call with someone and they're going through something or they're boohoo crying and you're like, I may just sit here silently and let them get that out. I don't need to say anything in this moment. I had two different lenses, I guess. One was when I'm having a one-on-one conversation with somebody and either I'm expressing big emotion or they are. Sitting in silence then could be an option when you're trying not to say the wrong thing or to be toxically positive. But yes, I hear you also, Peeve, that if there's something global going on,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out when to be silent and when to speak up. Because your silence can be deafening on the other side if you don't say anything when there's a global issue happening. So I had two different lenses when I was describing silence. Like I think of one when I was going through my cancer journey. People were super supportive and people meant well. And they wanted me to know that they were riding with me and they were rocking with me and they were thinking about me and praying for me. And I appreciated all of that. And there were times when I would get the overly positive, like, you're so strong. And it could be worse.
Oh, God.
They caught it early. It could be worse. You could have to do all of these other things, which there is truth to that. I did not have to go through chemo, thankfully. I did not have to go through radiation, thankfully. They did catch it early, thankfully. But that does not make my cancer journey less scary or less real
Mm-hmm.
because we're using a comparative lens and saying, well, it could be worse because this person did this. Because meanwhile, someone over on their own journey could say, oof, I had to go through cancer and radiation, but I didn't have to do a double mastectomy. comments like that, like, oh, it could be worse, or you're so strong. You know what? Sometimes I don't want to be strong. So someone reminding you that you're strong and you can do it, they mean well. Doesn't mean that I'm a negative person. Doesn't mean that I can't be positive, but it means someone may not feel fully seen
Yeah.
or heard when those, what did you call them?
Platitudes.
Thank you. I was about to say perplexities, and I don't even think that's a word. The platitudes. Yes. That's where they come into play.
There's a couple quotes from the book I wanted to share specifically about platitudes. She says, put the platitudes away and listen. Talk is cheap and platitudes are cheaper.
Mm.
And there's a couple of other quotes here that I had written down, and they speak exactly to what you were just sharing. It's okay to let someone experience their feelings. You don't have to fix it. Some things are just really, really hard, and that's okay. Watching people in pain is very difficult. Have compassion for yourself too.
Yeah.
And also, the person you are supporting gets to decide how they would like to be supported, and you get to decide if you're willing and able to provide that support.
I like that. Because as a person, I would classify myself as someone that's positive more often than not. I know that I've been guilty of saying things to people like, girl, you got this. It's good. You'll be fine. Don't even worry about it. You're good. And I realized I have been guilty of being toxically positive too, because I can be overly positive, even with myself.
I don't want to poo poo being positive. We are positive people, you know, and I think that this whole topic can be misinterpreted as like, oh, you just can't be positive at all. You have to just recognize all of the hard stuff and the negative feelings. And no, it's both. You know, it's making space for all of the emotions and all of the experiences and not minimizing any one of them.
Yeah, both can be true.
I am guilty of this one as a parent. And this is something that I was really proud of for teaching Everett. And he says it all the time now, which partly makes me really proud and partly makes me think, did I just plant the wrong seed?
Uh-oh.
Do you know Jimmy V, the coach that had cancer? And now that's where like all the coaches for cancer stuff initiated from.
Mm-mm.
There was a coach, basketball coach, that had a very public like cancer journey and lost it. And his quote is, don't give up, don't ever give up. And it's like on the back of a lot of my t-shirts from summer camps and stuff. And so that's actually been something that's been in my mind and heart my whole life. You know, I kind of live by that. Don't give up, don't ever give it up. Like just because things are hard doesn't mean you don't give it your all. And so I've taught that to Everett. And it was interesting because in this book, that was one of the toxically positive things you can say to someone, like, don't give up, don't give up. Because she's like, it's actually a good life skill to know when you need to walk away, to know when you need to do something
Oof.
else and change your course, you know, and pivot. And not to say you shouldn't work really hard and try your best and, you know, set goals that are high and go for them. But I was like, okay, how do I weave this into this motto that I've drilled into Everett's head now? You know, he's like a little parrot.
Oh, that's a good one. It is. It's like finding that balance because to your point, like it doesn't mean that we can't be positive and say like we have to work hard and we have to grind. But at some point, is the grind worth it? At some point, when do I just say, you know what, I'm good. I'm going to leave this where it is. Put my energy somewhere else.
There was another one that came up for me that she touched on in her book that I think I need to work on too. What she brought up in the book was this idea: if you just control your thoughts and emotions in the face of anything, you can overcome, you know, and you can achieve what you want to achieve. And if you're upset that it's your fault, that you're not doing something right, or you're not controlling your emotions or your thoughts in the right way to be positive. And it's kind of like, you know, with depression, clearly that is not the case. If someone is depressed, they can't just control their thoughts and emotions. It's just not that easy. That's why I think there's a lot of shame and embarrassment that can be tied to having negative thoughts and hard emotions. If you're not happy and joyful and positive, upbeat, you're going to be like, no one wants to be around me. I'm not that fun. But like we've created this whole culture where in order to be likable, you have to be happy and positive all the time. And we definitely push that on our kids. And she talks about that in the book too, that everyone wants a happy kid. Happy babies have an edge. Like everybody wants, oh, your baby's so happy. What a happy kid.
Mm.
We're kind of getting out of this now, but certainly in the generations before us, like happy and positivity and kids are rewarded. Don't cry, man up. We're not going to talk about all the hard emotions. We're just going to reward you when you're like doing all the fun stuff and being joyful and adding pleasure to everyone's lives, and these experiences. And if you're going to be crying or upset about something, we want to push that down and try to squash it as soon as we can.
Kind of goes back to that old school, children should be seen and not heard. Back in the day, if you were able to sit in the room and be quiet and play with your toys, or you're listening to something, but you don't get upset, like you're seen, you're there, but you're not heard. That did not happen in the Beale household. Let me just be clear. My parents did not push to be seen and not heard because you couldn't miss our loud mouths, but I digress. But that thought process of little kids should be seen and not heard then lends itself to how people turn into adults. Like when I have these strong emotions, I don't want to express them because I don't want to be seen as problematic. And so I'm going to suppress them.
And how many times have we heard and probably said, learning is fun? Well, it's great. Learning is fun for some people. Learning is not fun for a lot of people, And so why do we have to put that in the world, that learning has to be fun? Sometimes you just have to learn stuff because it's part of life.
This topic is tricky because it's very much a balance of, it's fine to be positive, and we, like you said, aren't poo-pooing on that. I mean, I am queen vision board, manifesting, speaking things into existence with prayer and, thinking positive. So all of those things are, yes, a part of my core. Like that's the stuff that I like. But that doesn't mean that I'm on that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just have to sit in the negative. And not in the negative. And maybe that's also part of it. I think it's changing the narrative. Because when we think of the word negative, it sounds bad.
Well, it's not just a 1 or a 0, right? It's not just like positive or it's negative.
Right.
So many things are the range between. They're not just good or bad.
Maybe that's just it. We can't label everything. And we try as a culture to label everything. So maybe it's not labeling it. It's just, how do you feel today? You feel terribly? Okay. Let me know how I can support you.
Something that she talks about in the book that was also resonated was just about gratitude. And I feel like this comes up for mothers a lot too. Like if we're complaining or things are really hard and we're expressing that, we sometimes can be viewed as not being grateful for what we have or grateful for our situation. And I mean, I think you could say that about anything, but it's
Right.
definitely true in motherhood. And I think our generations of moms are just way more communicative about how hard everything is. And for better or worse, like the generations before us seem to have amnesia and don't remember their kids having tantrums or meltdowns, being violent, or, all these things that are not likable about kids. But I guarantee you, every generation of babies and toddlers and small people have had all those behaviors. We're just more vocal that it's happening and when it's happening and how hard it can be to juggle working and parenting and being a spouse and being a friend and all of these spaces we want to show up in.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of have an impossible hand that we've been dealt as modern moms. And when we speak about it, it can be just viewed as like we're not grateful for being able to be a mom or, having the opportunities that we have for all of these different roles that we can play in life. And yeah, I don't know.
I guess it speaks volumes to having who you have around you. There have been several times, this, I've been, all right, I'm gone this weekend. I'm going to have a me weekend and I'm checking into a hotel and I'm just going to chill. I need to just decompress and I need a break and I'm checking into a hotel. My girlfriends and family and husband, for that matter, were like, good for you. Go do it. So I think it's important also that we I was going to say who we surround ourselves with, but there are also times, the people that you surround yourself with may be the people doling out some of the toxic positivity. So I guess you can go both ways. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, there are people that are supportive of moms taking their much needed breaks.
Yeah, for sure. But it's not just about taking breaks. It's just about being able to be real about the day to day, the week to week, the month to month.
I mentioned the breaks part because back in the day, it was frowned upon for a mom to say, I am leaving my child and my partner for a weekend to go decompress. So that's why I was highlighting breaks. Like today's generation, I feel like there are some that are more accepting of like, girl, take that break. But I don't think that was normalized
Oh, yeah,
until
no.
recently. That's what I meant.
She also talked about what happens when people don't feel like they can express all of the range of emotions that they're feeling and they just have to focus on being positive. Like, what are the repercussions for that individual? This is not surprising, but some of them, you look at yourself when you hear about it, or you kind of look at others like, is that person kind of suffering from this?
Hmm.
If you feel like you're experiencing these emotions and feelings that maybe you shouldn't be, what do you do to minimize or numb from those? And, she brought up shopping and food and alcohol, social media, all these things, and so you're just distracting yourself with these other things. And yeah, it can be really harmful when, maybe you could have avoided doing those things to numb if you just create space for all of these things and try to show up, do your best to show up for people where you feel like you have the opportunity to support them in
Yeah.
the ways that they need it, not just the things that are maybe going to make you feel good or like you're offering something positive. And, I've heard this a lot through therapy about the difference between guilt and shame. But if you're feeling guilt, you're telling yourself that you did something bad. And if you're feeling shame, you're feeling that you are bad.
Oh, I like
It's
that.
another thing that I think about with parenting is that at least Everett, because he is a challenging kiddo to caretake, he's constantly being told to do things differently and better. And so I can see he feels both guilt and shame a lot. So I kind of look around at myself and other adults like, how much of this started from being a really young person, like these feelings of guilt and shame that you carry through these different experiences through life.
I'm going to say it back to make sure I get it because that's deep. Guilt is when you feel bad, maybe about an action or something that you said or did. Shame is when you feel like you are bad, like a bad person. Huh. That's powerful if you think about that.
You can definitely think hard about that as an adult, like in your own life. But thinking about it as a little person who, their whole world are their parents and their, little bubbles of friends and family. We put so much into those relationships, especially these little people do. And if you feel guilt and shame around these relationships with people and how your behavior is impacting them, that's why like parenting is so much about how you respond, not necessarily about what the kids are actually doing or how they're behaving or, learning. And anyway, that's a whole thing.
It's not for the weak.
Going back to the numbing thing, a couple that she brought up that, the ones I already mentioned kind of are intuitive, right? Like distracting yourself with social media, eating too much, drinking too much, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But also traveling, which can be considered like running away from your problems. I'm like, I might be doing a little bit of that right now. I'm going to just be social and all the time and like not have to sit and think about the things that I, don't want to do. Like just constantly surrounding yourself with people or, activities, having stuff to do, distracting with TV or really diving into work or exercising. Of course, none of these things are bad to do. They're all wonderful to do in moderation. But when you are using them as a numbing distraction from creating space and dealing with some of these emotions and just managing them.
Well, I wish if I was doing anything to distract, I wish it was the exercising one. That one doesn't sound too bad. Yeah, distract yourself, Jamie. Come on. No, that's interesting. Those are less intuitive.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And really are only a problem, if you're doing those things to avoid or suppress or deny
Sure.
any feelings or emotions. So,
Hmm.
yeah. But one I wanted to bring up, this reminds me of you and some of our circles of friends. There's a part of the book where she talks about affirmations.
Mm.
We like our affirmations. And she talks about, when are they supportive and when are they more in the camp of just being in denial
Interesting.
and using gratitude as sort of a weapon of shame when you are in or the other person is in their like deepest moments of struggle. And then you're bringing up these affirmations. And we talked about this earlier, maybe it was offline, but how at least in the 80s, but maybe even before then, it was like, if you just think positively, you can overcome anything. And it's kind of was being in denial that you actually had to take action to overcome struggles, like something that could be
Medical
medical. Yeah.
decisions.
You can think positively, but you also have to take action. You can't just sit in your positive thoughts and think that, I'm going to be healed or, this relationship is going to be repaired that's really has me down or, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. Like you have to do both. You can't just think positively. She talks about like how to create healthy affirmations, not ones that are rooted in that denial and shaming yourself or shaming others. I thought that was interesting.
That is, because LJ and I do affirmations every night before we go to bed. But now I'm thinking about it. I'm like, well, I think it's different, right? We're not saying that we can't do affirmations. To your point, it's like you can do affirmations, yes. But if there is something that requires action in addition to the affirmations, then don't think that the affirmations alone are going to do the trick.
Right. And she gives some helpful tips on how to create affirmations that are healthy and attainable. And she says they work best when they're in line with your values, which I think is pretty intuitive, that they're truthful and achievable and backed up with real action. So that's the key to what we were just saying. So it's not just saying it, but it's connecting a to do with what you're saying and used to empower instead of covering up something or eliminating a distressing feeling. You're not just saying like, don't feel this bad thing, be positive, feel good. It's what can you do to feel better? What can you do to overcome this? How can you find a solution?
Well, like for me, if I'd said, you know what, I'm a tough person and I'm strong and I'm good and I'll be all right. It's like, you will be, but I'm also need you to go ahead and get that double mastectomy.
Mm-hmm.
You need action. So you can say that you're going to be fine because I was positive through it for the most part. But that doesn't mean that me just alone saying like, oh, I'll be fine. That doesn't mean that I need to go ahead and do the medical procedure that is going to help me continue to be fine.
And then the emotional work on top of that, which you're
Mm-hmm.
constantly working on that too. We've talked about not only with all the various types of therapies that you've been doing, but also grief counseling. It's not a one-hit wonder.
No, it's not. It's ongoing. I was going back to LJ and his little affirmations, and it is the cutest thing because we say, repeat after me. I am smart. He's like, I am smart. Say, you are kind. You are kind. We make it up every night, but it's usually smart, kind, patient, which is funny. Now I'm thinking, is that toxic positivity? Because he's 3 and he's probably going to be impatient. Then I add the ones like, I am cute. I am lovable. But it's funny also because one is, and I can do anything. Now, we want him to believe he can do anything because he is a cool little dude. So I don't want to not have that in his affirmations, but I'm thinking about what we're talking about in the context of this podcast. And, that could be one that maybe at 3, I think he's fine to say we can do anything. We want him to feel that. But as he gets older, weaving into that, yes, you can do anything. But if there ever comes a time when you're pouring your all into something and it just isn't what we thought it was going to be, it's also okay to walk away. But right now it's you can do anything.
And what we were talking about earlier is not everyone starts from the same place. So it is also about privilege. Like you can do anything. But to your point, not everyone has the same opportunity. So it's not like you can just say, work hard and you can achieve anything. That is true for some people. Some people who have been born into a really comfortable place in life, they can work hard and they can probably achieve anything. And of course, there are exceptions of very cool stories that have gone against that
Of
grain.
course.
But in general, it's important that as these kids grow, we do teach them that not everyone starts from the same place. And so you need to know where you start from and then know how you can get to where you need to go. And then also, like you said, like know when maybe you need to do something different.
I like that you brought that back into this live conversation because you're right. We're not all starting from the same part. So it's, yes, you can work hard, and there's a level of social equity that allows you to get ahead that everybody does not have access to.
Yeah. Can I offer some suggestions to your affirmations with LJ?
Please.
All of those things are awesome that you are saying with him, but you could also say things like, I'm learning. I need to go to school and work hard to learn, to keep learning or something. Or I make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. I make mistakes. That's how I learn. Perfection is not the goal. Being kind every minute of every day, being patient every minute of every day. Like these are just unrealistic expectations of a small person and adults too. I mean, really any person, right?
Yeah.
Those are the goals. And I think we all need to keep those in mind, no matter how old we are. And we all need to say those to ourselves. Like, we want to be kind. We want to be patient. We want to be smart. We want to be cute, all those things, you know? But there's going to be times where we're not, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could sprinkle some of those things in like a super tangible way for, LJ.
Absolutely.
I came across this in a different sphere. I was listening to NPR thing, but that brought me right back to this topic of toxic positivity. But it was about likability. And I think about that with Everett. And I probably say things that I shouldn't about if you're upset all the time. We want to make people that are around us feel good, not feel bad. And in general, I do believe that, but that's a lot of pressure to put on a little person. And I listen to all these other parenting podcasts and tips and all that stuff. And of course, it's like so far into the camp of you can never say this and you can never say those things.
I mean,
but it also is part of life. Like you also need people to want to be around you to an extent. So it's such a hard thing to teach someone, ourselves included. Like I think about this having grown up on the East Coast. And I don't know if this is an East Coast, West Coast thing, or if this is just times have been changing as I've been going into adulthood. But when I was growing up, this never came into my world, toxic positivity. Like we just kept it real in New York, like I remember people being totally fine with every kind of emotion. Nobody was trying to poo poo sharing your thoughts and feelings. That's a very natural thing for a New Yorker. But, and I've shared this before, but now that I'm in California as an adult, I feel it so heavy on me all the time. And I bring it back to this likability piece. Like, I genuinely feel like I am not as liked in these circles of people. Like, it's all about being positive and seeing the bright side. And I cannot tell you how many text threads I have where I put myself out there a little bit and I share something that I'm going through that's not fun to think about or talk about. And the only thing I get back is like, well, at least you were in a sunny place or something like that. I feel like this thing about likability, it's twisting yourself into shape so people will like you. And I see it as just being a cousin to having to be positive all the time so that people will want to be around you and that you're pleasant and you bring the fun and you bring the joy. And it's like, that's great, but it's also not real life. You can't be that person all the time. And if you never get to express all that other stuff and feel and manage all that other stuff, you can't fully even live that part, that like fun loving part of your life because you're weighed down with all that other stuff.
I think we need to change the narrative around what likability means. Maybe it's a definition of what likability is, because I agree with you 100% that likability usually equates itself to like being positive and upbeat and you're funny and everybody wants to be around you. And I think we need to change that a little bit. I think we need to change that to likability is on par with authenticity. So my authentic self is that, yes, I can be upbeat and funny and happy and positive. But the other part of my authentic self is that if some shit doesn't feel good, I'm going to talk about why it doesn't feel good without you telling me why it should feel good. So, yeah, to your point, Peeve, I think just as a culture, we have assigned synonyms to likability of like positive and happy go lucky and free spirited and easygoing. That's the one. You're easygoing. You go with the flow. And it's like, okay, that can be a part of being likable. But I think a large part of being likable should also be that you are genuine with all of your feelings, not just the ones that are going to make you comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It also has to be about what makes me comfortable.
It's also like, what's the goal in life? Is it to be happy? Sure, that can be part of it. But I like what you were saying, and it's to be authentic. And happiness can come along with that. Like if you're forging your life that are in line with your values and you're being authentic, instead of just having happiness be the goal, because you're going to, like I said, like twist yourself into all sorts of shapes if you're just trying to be happy all the time, instead of just trying to be authentic and living life as it comes to you and being rooted in your values.
Ain't nobody got time to be happy all the time. And that's coming from someone who genuinely is happy probably most of the time. But ain't nobody got time for that. There's a book that I read when I was in grad school, and it's called Finding Your Own North Star. And it's a dynamic book because it talks about there are two versions of us. There is our essential self, which is who we are to the core when we're born, and that person that is just who we are innately. And then there is our social self, which is who we've been conditioned to believe we need to be in this life. And the more aligned our social self and our essential selves, I guess it's plural selves, are, the more aligned, the closer we are to our North Star, which means we are centered and we feel like we are authentically who we are every day, good, bad, and ugly, because I'm not letting social norms determine how much of my essential self I show up with every day. The further or farther, whichever one of those, apart that those two lives get. And so when we start deviating from our essential selves because we're allowing our social selves to take over and social norms to determine who we should be and how we should act, how we should engage with people, we let those social norms take over. We are getting that farther along from our essential selves. And then we're completely misaligned. To your question, what is the purpose of life? I think, it's just my opinion, and based off of what I took from that book, it's to get both parts of me fully aligned to where my essential self of who I am innately, who I am to my core, is present more often than not. And if I'm really mom, it would be all the time. I am Jamie authentically. And I am aware that the social self is trying to take over. So the more that I can align who I am to my core with my social norms, the more purpose that I'll feel in this life that I'm living.
I love that. I've never heard you share that before.
It just came to me. I've never shared it. Yeah. Thank you. I shouldn't say I've never shared it. I did a speaking engagement on leveraging your core competencies to build a life of purpose. And as I was putting that presentation together, I thought about that book and I was like, oh, there was this book that I read when I was in grad school. So I pulled it back up and I listened to it again. And I was like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. Living a life of purpose is aligning our essential selves and our social selves, but not allowing social norms to determine how much of me I come to play with every day. And I think to your point, teaching the little people that now that all parts of you are awesome and that your essential self can be aligned with your social self. If we start putting that in their brains now, then yeah, we are kind of setting them up for maybe that much more of a pleasurable existence.
Pleasurable and accepting, not only of others, but also themselves.
Yeah.
And ourselves, as adults. This is for everybody.
It's easier said than done.
Yeah. With everything, we're going to make mistakes. We make mistakes all the time. And that's okay.
I'm glad we talked about this. It's a difficult one because there's a thin line between saying, don't be so damn positive. And, living your life. But hopefully we were able to navigate through those channels.
And be positive.
Yeah.
It's not about not being positive. It's about being everything, being true to what you're feeling and experiencing.
Being your essential self. I can be positive, and that doesn't mean that I can't have a bad day.
One of the big take homes from the book, which is not new or rocket science, is find your people. And with that, thank you all for being our people. Thanks for showing up here every episode and hanging with us. It's so interesting because, I see some of the social media traffic on our Instagram, which is @_is_a_mother_podcast. We would love for you to come hang out with us there. But I also get so many DMs from people who don't interact in that way, but they love following the podcast and I know they're listening and it's just so interesting. I think we have a lot more reach than we even know. And it makes me really happy to think about that.
Me too. And that we are able to show up authentically and share and to feel the support from people. So
yeah,
we appreciate y'all. Thanks for being in our community, part of our community. And thanks for tuning in, like Peeve said. And continue engaging with us so we know there may be some topics that you want us to dive into, and we'd love to do so. So please keep the feedback coming.
If social media is not your thing, please rate and review on whatever podcast streaming platform that you use. It really will help us raise awareness to more circles of friends.
Amen, sister.
Love you, Jay.
Love you, Peeve. Love you, community.
Go call your friends.
Bye, y'all. We'll see you next episode.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening and being part of our conversation and our inner circle.
Follow us on Instagram, _is_a_mother_podcast. And we look forward to you and your best friends joining us next episode.
Leave a rating on this podcast app. It really helps us get our conversations to more friends out there, more friendship circles, and more women and more mothers. And that's what we're here for, to broaden the conversation, to bring everybody into the circle.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Go call your best friend.